Sinus problems, felt right in the face and so close to the nose, represent being irritated by someone in your life, someone who is close to you. You might even feel they are bearing down on you. We forget that we create the situations. Then we give our power away by blaming the other person for our frustration. No person, no place, and no thing has any power over us, for we are the only thinkers in our mind. We create our experiences, our reality, and everyone in it. When we create peace and harmony and balance in our mind, we will find it in our lives. The neck and throat are fascinating because so much stuff goes on there. The neck represents the ability to be flexible in our thinking, to see the other side of a question, and to see another person's viewpoint. When there are problems with the neck, it usually means we are being stubborn about our own concept of a situation. Virginia Satir, the brilliant family therapist, says she did some silly research and found that there are more than 250 different ways to wash dishes, depending on who is washing and the equipment used. If we are stuck in believing there is only one way or one viewpoint, then we are shutting out most of life. The throat represents our ability to speak up for ourselves, to ask for what we want, to say I am, etc. When we have throat problems, it usually means we do not feel we have the right to do these things. We feel inadequate to stand up for ourselves. Sore throats are always anger. If a cold is involved, then there is mental confusion too. Laryngitis usually means you are so angry you cannot speak. The throat also represents the creative flow in the body. This is where we express our creativity. And when our creativity is stifled and frustrated, we often have throat problems. We all know many people who live their whole lives for others. They never once get to do what they want to do. They are always pleasing mothers or fathers or spouses or lovers or bosses. Tonsillitis and thyroid problems are just frustrated creativity, not being able to do what you want to do. The energy center in the throat, the fifth chakra, is the place in the body where change takes place. When we are resisting change, or are in the middle of change, or are trying to change, we often have a lot of activity in our throats. Notice when you cough or when someone else coughs. What has just been said? What are we reacting to? Is it resistance and stubbornness? Or is it the process of change taking place? In a workshop, I use coughs as a tool for self-discovery. Every time someone coughs, I have that person touch their throat and say out loud, I am willing to change, or I am changing. The arms represent our ability and capacity to embrace the experiences of life. The upper arms have to do with our capacity, and the lower arms with our abilities. We store old emotions in our joints, and the elbows represent our flexibility in changing directions. Are you flexible about a changing direction in your life? Or are old emotions keeping you stuck in one spot? Hands grasp, hands hold, hands clench. We let things slip through our fingers. Sometimes we hold on too long. We are handy, tight-fisted, open-handed, penny pinchers, butterfingers. We give handouts. We can handle ourselves, or we can't seem to handle anything. We put a handle on something. It's hands down, hands off, hanky-panky. We give someone a hand, our hand in hand. It's on hand or out of hand, underhanded or overhanded. We have helping hands. Hands can be gentle, or they can be hard with knotty knuckles from overthinking or arthritic criticism. Grasping hands come from fear, fear of loss, fear of never having enough, fear that it won't stay if you hold lightly. Tightly grasping a relationship only has the partner run away in desperation. Tightly clenched hands cannot take in anything new. Shaking the hands freely from the wrists gives a feeling of looseness and openness. That which belongs to you cannot be taken from you, so relax. The fingers each have meaning. Problems in the fingers show where you need to relax and let go. If you cut your index finger, there is probably anger and fear that has to do with your ego in some current situation. The thumb is mental and represents worry. The index finger is the ego and fear. The middle finger has to do with sex and with anger. When angry, hold your middle finger and watch the anger dissolve. Hold the right finger if your anger is at a man, and the left finger if it is at a woman. The ring finger is both unions and grief. The little finger has to do with the family and pretending. The back represents our support system. Problems with the back often mean we feel we are not being supported. Too often we think we are only supported by our job or by our family or spouses. In reality, we are totally supported by the universe, by life itself. The upper back has to do with feeling the lack of emotional support. My husband, wife, lover, friend, boss doesn't understand me or support me. The middle back has to do with guilt. All that stuff that is in back of us. Are you afraid to see what is back there? Or are you hiding what is back there? Do you feel stabbed in the back? Do you really feel burnt out? Are your finances in a mess? Or do you worry about them excessively? Then your lower back may be bothering you. The lack of money or the fear of money will do it. The amount you have has nothing to do with it. So many of us feel that money is the most important thing in our lives and that we could not live without it. This is not true. There is something far more important and precious to us without which we could not live. What is that? It is our breath. Our breath is the most precious substance in our lives, and yet we totally take for granted when we exhale that our next breath will be there. If we did not take another breath, we would not last 3 minutes. Now, if the power that created us has given us enough breath to last for as long as we shall live, can we not trust that everything else we need will be supplied? The lungs represent our capacity to take in and give out life. Problems with the lungs usually mean we are afraid to take in life, or perhaps we feel we do not have the right to live fully. Women have traditionally been very shallow breathers and have often thought of themselves as second-class citizens who did not have the right to take up space, and sometimes not even the right to live. Today this is changing. Women are taking their place as full members of society and breathing deeply and fully. It pleases me to see women in sports. Women have always worked in the fields, but this is the first time in history, as far as I know, that women have gone into sports, and it's wonderful to see the magnificent bodies that are emerging. Emphysema and heavy smoking are ways of denying life. It covers a deep feeling of being totally unworthy of existing. Scolding will not change the habit of smoking. It is the basic belief that must change first. The breasts represent the mothering principle. When there are problems with the breasts, it usually means we are over-mothering either a person, a place, or a thing, or even an experience. Part of the mothering process is to allow the child to grow up. We need to know when to take our hands off and when to turn over the reins and let them be. Being overprotective does not prepare the other person to handle their own experience. Sometimes our overbearing attitudes literally cut off nourishment in a situation. If cancer is involved, then there is also deep resentment. Release the fear and know the intelligence of the universe resides in each of us. We need to nourish ourselves. The heart, of course, represents love, while our blood represents joy. Our hearts lovingly pump joy throughout our bodies. When we deny ourselves joy and love, the heart shrivels and becomes cold. As a result, the blood gets sluggish and we creep our way to anemia, angina, and heart attacks. The heart does not attack us. We get so caught up in the soap opera and dramas we create that we often forget to notice the little joys that surround us. We spend years squeezing all the joy out of the heart, and it literally falls over in pain. Heart attack people are never joyous people. If they do not take the time to appreciate the joys of life, they will just recreate another heart attack in time. Heart of gold, cold-hearted, open heart, black heart, loving heart, warm-hearted. Where is your heart? The stomach digests all the new ideas and experiences we have. What or who can't you stomach? What gets you in the gut? When there are stomach problems, it usually means we don't know how to assimilate new experiences. We are afraid. When commercial airplanes first became popular, getting inside a big metal tube that would carry us safely through the sky was a new idea we found hard to assimilate. And at every seat there were throw-up bags, and most of us were using them. We would use our little barf bags as discreetly as we could, wrap them up, and hand them to the stewardess, who spent a lot of her time running up and down the aisles collecting them. Now it is many years later, and though the bags are still at every seat, they are seldom used. We have assimilated the idea of flying. Ulcers are tremendous fear of not being good enough. We fear not being good enough for a parent, but mostly not being good enough for a boss. We can't stomach who we are. We rip our guts apart trying to please others. No matter how important our job is, our inner self-esteem is very low. We are afraid they will find out about us. Love is the answer here. People who love and approve of themselves never get ulcers. Be gentle and loving to the child within, and give it all the support and encouragement you wanted when you were little. The genitals represent the most feminine part of a woman, her femininity, or the most masculine part of a man, his masculinity. When we do not feel comfortable with either being a man or a woman, when we reject our sexuality, when we reject our bodies as dirty or sinful, then we often have problems in the genital area. I seldom come across a person who was reared in a household where the genitals and their functions were called by their right names. We all grew up with euphemisms of one sort or another. Remember the ones your own family used? It could have been as mild as down there to names that made you feel your genitals were dirty and disgusting. Yes, we all grew up believing that something was not quite right between our legs. I feel the sexual revolution that exploded a few years ago was in one way a good thing. We were moving away from Victorian hypocrisy. Many of us began to enjoy the pleasure and freedom of our bodies in a new and open way. However, few of us thought to deal with what Rosa Lamont, the founder of the Self-Communication Institute, calls Mama's God. Whatever your mother taught you about God when you were 3 years old is still there in your subconscious mind unless You have done some conscious work to release it. Was that God an angry, avenging God? What did that God feel about sex? If we are still carrying those early guilt feelings about our sexuality and our bodies, then we are surely going to create punishments for ourselves. Bladder problems, anal problems, vaginitis, and prostate and penis problems all come under the same area. They stem from distorted beliefs about our bodies and the correctness of their functions. Every organ in our body is a magnificent expression of life with its own special functions. We do not think of our livers or our eyes as dirty or sinful. Why do we choose to believe our genitals are? The anus is as beautiful as the ear. Without our anus, we would have no way to release what the body no longer needs, and we would die very quickly. Every part of our body and every function of our body is perfect and normal, natural and beautiful. I ask clients with sexual problems to begin to relate to their rectum, penis, or vagina with a sense of love and appreciation for their functions and their beauty. If you are beginning to cringe or get irate, ask yourself why. Who told you to deny any part of your body? Certainly not God. Our sexual organs were created as the most pleasurable part of our body. To deny this is to create pain and punishment. Sex is not only okay, it is glorious and wonderful. It is as normal for us to have sex as it is for us to breathe or to eat. Just for a moment, try to visualize the vastness of the universe. It is beyond our comprehension. Even our top scientists, with their latest equipment, cannot measure its size. And within this universe, there are many galaxies. And in one of these smaller galaxies, in a far-off corner, there is a minor sun. And around this sun revolves a few pinpoints, one of which is called planet Earth. I find it hard to believe that the vast, incredible intelligence that created this entire universe is only an old man sitting on a cloud above the planet Earth, watching my genitals. And yet so many of us were taught this concept as a child. It is vital that we release foolish, outmoded ideas that do not support us and nourish us. I feel strongly that even our concept of God needs to be one that is for us, not against us. There are so many different religions to choose from. If you have one now that tells you you are a sinner and a lowly worm, get another one. I am not suggesting that everybody runs around having free sex. I am saying that some of our rules do not make sense, and that is why so many people break them and become hypocrites. When we remove sexual guilt from people and teach them to love and respect themselves, then they will automatically treat themselves and others in ways that are for their highest good and greatest joy. The reason we have so many problems with our sexuality is because many of us have self-hatred and self-disgust, and so we treat ourselves and others badly. It is not enough to teach children in school the mechanics of sexuality. We need on a very deep level to allow children to remember that their bodies, genitals, and sexuality are something to rejoice about. I truly believe that people who love themselves and their bodies will not abuse themselves or others. I find that most bladder problems come from being pissed off, usually at a partner. Something makes us angry that has to do with our femininity or our masculinity. Women have more bladder problems than men because they are more prone to hide their hurt. Vaginitis, again, usually involves feeling romantically hurt by a partner. Men's prostate problems have a lot to do with self-worth and also believing that as he gets older he becomes less of a man. Impotence adds fear and sometimes is even related to spite against a previous mate. Frigidity comes from fear or a belief that it is wrong to enjoy the body. It also comes from self-disgust, and it can be intensified by an insensitive partner. PMS, premenstrual syndrome, which has reached epidemic proportions, is concurrent with the increase of media advertising. These ads continuously hammer home the concept that the female body must be sprayed and powdered and douched and over-cleansed in numerous ways to make it even barely acceptable. At the same time, women are coming into their own as equal beings, while being bombarded negatively with the idea that the feminine processes are not quite acceptable. This, combined with the tremendous amounts of sugar being consumed today, creates a fertile breeding ground for PMS. The feminine processes, all of them, including menstruation and menopause, are normal, natural processes. We must accept them as that. Our bodies are beautiful, magnificent, and wondrous. It is my belief that venereal disease is almost always sexual guilt. It comes from a feeling, often subconscious, that it is not right to express ourselves sexually. A carrier with a venereal disease can have many partners, but only those whose mental and physical immune systems are weak will be susceptible to it. In addition to the old standard diseases, in recent years we have created an increase of herpes. This is a disease that comes back again and again to punish us for our belief that we are bad. Herpes has a tendency to flare up when we're emotionally upset, and that tells us a lot right there. Now, let's take that same theory over into the gay community, where they have all the same problems everybody else has, plus much of society pointing their fingers at them and saying, bad. Usually their own mothers and fathers are also saying, you're bad. This is a very heavy load to carry. So now we have a disease called AIDS, which is a much more frightening disease than herpes and can even be fatal. In the heterosexual society, many women dread growing old because of the belief system we have created around the glory of youth. It is not so difficult for the men because they become distinguished with a bit of gray hair. The older man often gets respect, and people may even look up to him. Not so for most gay men, for they have created a culture that places tremendous emphasis on youth and beauty. While everyone is young to start with, only a few fit the standard of beauty. So much emphasis has been placed on the physical appearance of the body that the feelings inside have been totally disregarded. If you are not young and beautiful, it's almost as though you don't count, only the body. This way of thinking is another way of saying gay is not good enough. Because of the ways gay people often treat other gays, the experience of getting old can be something to dread. It is almost better to die than to get old. And AIDS is a disease that often kills. Too often gay men feel that when they get older, they will be useless and unwanted. It is almost better to destroy themselves first, and many have created a destructive lifestyle. Some of the concepts and attitudes that are so much a part of the gay lifestyle, the meat rack, the constant judging, the refusal to get close to another, etc., are monstrous, and AIDS is a monstrous disease. These sorts of attitudes and behavior patterns can only create guilt on a very deep level, no matter how much we may camp. Camping, which can be such fun, can also be extremely destructive, both to the givers and the recipients. It's another way of avoiding closeness and intimacy. In no way am I trying to create guilt for anyone. However, we need to look at the things that need to be changed in order for all of our lives to function with love and joy and respect. 50 years ago, almost all gay men were closeted, and now they have been able to create pockets in society where they can at least be relatively open. I feel it is unfortunate that much of what they have created gives so much pain to their gay brothers. While it is often deplorable the way straights treat gays, it is tragic the way many gays treat other gays. Men traditionally have always had more sexual partners than women, and when men get together, of course there will be a great deal more sex. That's all fine and good. However, some men like having lots of partners to satisfy their deep need for self-esteem rather than for the joy of it. I do not believe there is anything wrong with having several partners when safe sex is practiced. However, if we need several partners in a day just to prove our self-worth, then we are not coming from a nourishing space, and we need to make some mental changes. This is a time for healing, for making whole, not for condemnation. We must rise out of the limitations of the past. We are all divine, magnificent expressions of life, and let us claim that now. The colon represents our ability to let go, to release that which we no longer need. The body, being in the perfect rhythm and flow of life, needs a balance of intake, assimilation, and elimination. It is only our fears that block the releasing of the old. Even if constipated people are not actually stingy, they usually do not trust that there will ever be enough. They hold on to an old relationship that gives them pain. They are afraid to throw out clothes that have been in the closet for years because they might need them someday. They stay in a stifling job or never give themselves pleasure because they must save for that rainy day. We do not rummage in last night's garbage to find today's meal. Learn to trust the process of life always to bring you what you need. Our legs carry us forward in life. Leg problems often indicate a fear of moving forward or a reluctance to move forward in a certain direction. We run with our legs, we drag our legs, we pussyfoot, we are knock-kneed, pigeon-toed, and we have big, fat, angry thighs filled with childhood resentments. Not wanting to do things will often produce minor leg problems. Varicose veins represent standing in a job or a place we hate. The veins lose their ability to carry joy. Knees, like the neck, have to do with flexibility, only they express bending and pride and ego and stubbornness. Often when moving forward, we are fearful of bending, and we become inflexible. This stiffens the joints. We want to move forward, but we do not want to change our ways. This is why knees take so long to heal. Our ego is involved, and we get our pride and our self-righteousness involved. The next time you have a knee problem, ask yourself where you are being self-righteous, where you are refusing to bend. Drop the stubbornness and let it go. Life is flow, life is movement, and to be comfortable, we must be flexible and move with it. A willow tree bends and sways and flows with the wind, and is always graceful and at ease with life. Our feet have to do with our understanding of ourselves and of life, past, present, and future. Many old people have a difficult time walking. Their understanding has been warped, and they often feel there is no place to go. Little children move on happy dancing feet. Elderly people often shuffle as if they were reluctant to move. Our skin represents our individuality. Skin problems usually mean we feel our individuality is being threatened somehow. We feel that others have power over us. We are thin-skinned. Things get under our skin. We feel skinned alive. Our nerves are right under our skin. One of the quickest ways to heal skin problems is to nurture yourself by saying in your mind, "I approve of myself," several hundred times a day. Take back your own power. Accidents are no accident. Like everything else in our lives, we create them. It is not that we necessarily say, "I want to have an accident," but we do have the mental thought patterns that can attract an accident to us. Some people seem to be accident-prone, and others go for a lifetime without ever getting a scratch. Accidents are expressions of anger. They indicate built-up frustrations at not feeling the freedom to speak up for oneself. Accidents also indicate rebellion against authority. We get so mad we want to hit people, and instead we get hit. When we are angry at ourselves, when we feel guilty, when we feel the need for punishment, an accident is a marvelous way of taking care of that. An accident is not our fault. An accident allows us to turn to others for sympathy and attention. We get our wounds bathed and attended to. We often get bed rest, sometimes for an extended period of time, and we get pain. Where this pain occurs in the body gives us a clue to which area of life we feel guilty about. The degree of physical damage lets us know how severely we felt we needed to be punished and how long the sentence should be. Anorexia bulimia is denying the self-life, an extreme form of self-hatred. Food is nourishment on the most basic level. Why would you deny yourself nourishment? Why do you want to die? What is going on in your life that is so awful that you want to get out completely? Self-hatred is only hating a thought you have about yourself, and thoughts can be changed. What is so terrible about you? Were you reared in a critical family? Did you have critical teachers? Did your early religious training tell you you were not good enough as you are? So often we try to find reasons that make sense to us for why we are not loved and accepted just as we are. Because of the fashion industry's obsession with slenderness, many women who believe "I'm not good enough, what's the use?" will use their bodies as a focal point for self-hatred. On one level they are saying, "If I were only thin enough, then they would love me." But it doesn't work. Nothing works from the outside. Self-approval and self-acceptance are the key. Arthritis is a disease that comes from a constant pattern of criticism. First of all, criticism of the self, and then criticism of other people. Arthritic people often attract a lot of criticism because it is their pattern to criticize. They are cursed with perfectionism, the need to be perfect at all times in every situation. Do you know of anyone on this planet who is perfect? I do not. Why do we set up standards that say we have to be super person in order to be barely acceptable? It's such a strong expression of not being good enough, and such a heavy burden to carry. Asthma we call smother love. There is a feeling that you do not have the right to breathe for yourself. Asthmatic children often have overdeveloped consciences. They take on guilt feelings for whatever seems wrong in their environment. They feel unworthy, therefore guilty, and in the need of self-punishment. Geographic cures sometimes work with asthma, especially if the family does not go along. Usually, asthmatic children will outgrow their disease. This really means they go away to school, get married, or leave home somehow, and the disease dissolves. Later in life, an experience may happen that pushes an old button within them, and they have another attack. When that happens, they are not really responding to the current circumstances, but rather to what used to go on in their childhood. Boils and burns, cuts, fevers, sores, itis, and inflammations all are indications of anger expressing in the body. Anger will find its way to express, no matter how much we try to suppress it. Steam that is built up must be released. We fear our anger lest we destroy our world, yet anger can be released as simply as saying, "I'm angry about this." True, we can't always say this to our bosses. We can, however, beat the bed or scream in the car or play tennis or run. These are harmless ways of physically releasing anger. Spiritual people often believe they shouldn't get angry. True, we are all working towards the time when we no longer blame others for our feelings. But until we arrive there, it is healthier to acknowledge what we do feel in the moment. Cancer is a disease caused by deep resentment held for a long time till it literally eats away at the body. Something happens in childhood that destroys the sense of trust. This experience is never forgotten, and the individual lives with a sense of self-pity, finding it hard to develop and maintain long-term, meaningful relationships. Because of that belief system, life seems to be a series of disappointments. A feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and loss permeates the thinking, and it becomes easy to blame others for all our problems. People with cancer are also very self-critical. To me, learning to love and accept the self is the key to healing cancers. Overweight represents a need for protection. We seek protection from hurts, slights, criticism, abuse, sexuality, and sexual advances, from a fear of life in general and also specifically. Take your choice. I am not a heavy person, yet I have learned over the years that when I am feeling insecure and not at ease, I will put on a few pounds. When the threat is gone, the excess weight goes away by itself. Fighting fat is a waste of time and energy. Diets don't work. The minute you stop, the weight goes back up. Loving and approving of yourself, trusting in the process of life, and feeling safe because you know the power of your own mind make up the best diet I know of. Go on a diet from negative thoughts, and your weight will take care of itself. Too many parents stuff food in the baby's mouth, no matter what the problem is. These babies grow up to stand in front of an open refrigerator saying, "I don't know what I want," whenever there's a problem. Pain of any sort, to me, is an indication of guilt. Guilt always seeks punishment, and punishment creates pain. Chronic pain comes from chronic guilt, often so deeply buried that we're not even aware of what it is. Guilt is a totally useless emotion. It never makes anyone feel better, nor does it change a situation. Your sentence is now over, so let yourself out of prison. Forgiving is only letting go. Strokes are blood clots, congestion in the bloodstream in the area of the brain, cutting off the blood supply to the brain. The brain is the computer of the body. Blood is joy. The veins and arteries are channels of joy. Everything works under the law and the action of love. There is love in every bit of intelligence in the universe. It is impossible to work and function well without love and joy being experienced. Negative thinking clogs up the brain, and there is no room for love and joy to flow in its free and open way. Laughter cannot flow if it is not allowed to be free and foolish. It is the same with love and joy. Life is not grim unless we make it so, unless we choose to look at it in that way. We can find total disaster in the smallest upset, and we can find some joy in the greatest tragedy. It is up to us. Sometimes we try to force our life to go in a certain way when it's not for our highest good. Sometimes we create strokes to force us to go in a totally different direction, to reevaluate our lifestyle. Stiffness in the body represents stiffness in the mind. Fear makes us cling to old ways, and we find it difficult to be flexible. If we believe there is only one way to do something, we often find ourselves becoming stiff. We can always find another way to do things. Remember Virginia Satir and her 250 different ways to do dishes. Surgery has its place. It is good for broken bones and accidents, and for conditions beyond the abilities of a beginner to dissolve. It may be easier under these conditions to have the operation and concentrate all the mental healing work on seeing that the condition is not recreated. More and more each day, there are many wonderful people in the medical profession who are truly dedicated to helping humanity. More and more doctors are turning to holistic ways of healing, treating the whole person. Yet most doctors do not work with the cause of any illness. They only treat the symptom, the effect. They do this in one of two ways. They poison or they mutilate. Surgeons cut, and if you go to surgeons, they will usually recommend cutting. However, if the decision for surgery is made, prepare yourself for this experience so it will go as smoothly as possible and you will heal as rapidly as possible. Ask the surgeon and staff to cooperate with you in this. Surgeons and their staffs in the operating rooms are often unaware that even though the patient is unconscious, they are still hearing and picking up everything said on a subconscious level. With my own clients, I always suggest they affirm that every hand that touches me in the hospital is a healing hand and expresses only love. And the operation goes quickly and easily and perfectly. Another is, I am totally comfortable at all times. After the surgery, have some soft and pleasant music playing as much as possible and affirm to yourself, I am healing rapidly, comfortably, and peacefully. Tell yourself, every day I feel better and better. If you can, make yourself a tape of a series of positive affirmations. Take your tape recorder to the hospital and let these play over and over while you rest and recuperate. Notice sensations, not pain. Imagine love flowing from your own heart down through your arms and into your hands, and place your hands over the part that is healing and say to this place, I love you and I'm helping you to get well. Swelling of the body represents clogging and stagnation in the emotional thinking. We create situations where we get hurt and we cling to these memories. Swelling often represents bottled up tears, feeling stuck and trapped, or blaming others for our own limitations. Release the past. Let it wash away. Take back your own power. Stop dwelling on what you don't want. Use your mind to create what you do want. Let yourself flow with the tide of life. Tumors are false growths. An oyster takes a tiny grain of sand and to protect itself grows a hard and shiny shell around it. We call it a pearl and think it is beautiful. We can take an old hurt and nurse it and keep pulling the scab off it, and in time we have a tumor. I call this running the old movie. I believe the reason women have so many tumors in the uterus area is that they take an emotional hurt, a blow to their femininity, and nurse it. I call this the he done me wrong syndrome. Just because a relationship ends does not mean there is something wrong with us, nor does it lessen our self-worth. It is not what happens. It is how we react to it. We are each 100% responsible for all our experiences. What belief about yourself do you need to change in order to attract more loving kinds of behavior? In the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. I recognize my body as a good friend. Each cell in my body has divine intelligence. I listen to what it tells me and know that its advice is valid. I am always safe and divinely protected and guided. I choose to be healthy and free. All is well in my world. Chapter 15. I am healthy, whole, and complete. Chapter 15 of the book is a list which correlates diseases you may have had or are having and the probable causes. That list can be found on the tape from my book entitled Heal Your Body. Chapter 16. My Story. Will you tell me a little about your childhood, briefly? This is a question I've asked so many clients. It is not that I need to hear all the details. If they have problems now, the patterns that created them began a long time ago. When I was a little girl of 18 months, I experienced my parents divorcing. I don't remember that as being so bad. What I do remember is when my mother went to work as a live-in domestic and boarded me out. The story goes that I cried nonstop for 3 weeks. The people taking care of me couldn't handle that, and my mother had to make other arrangements. How she managed as a single parent brings my admiration today. Then, however, all I knew and cared about was that I was not getting all the loving attention I once had. I have never been able to determine if my mother loved my stepfather or whether she married him in order to provide a home for us. This man had been brought up in Europe in a heavy Germanic home with much brutality, and he had never learned any other way to manage a family. My mother became pregnant with my sister, and then the 1930s depression descended upon us, and we found ourselves stuck in a home of violence. I was 5 years old. To add to the scenario, it was just about this time that a neighbor, an old wino as I remember, raped me. The doctor's examination is still vivid in my mind, as was the court case in which I was the star witness. The man was sentenced to 15 years in prison. I was told repeatedly it was your fault, and I spent many years fearing that when he was released, he would come and get me for being so terrible as to put him in jail. Most of my childhood was spent enduring both physical and sexual abuse, with a lot of hard labor thrown in. My self-image became lower and lower, and few things seemed to go right for me. I began to express this pattern in the outside world. There was an incident in the 4th grade that was so typical of what my life was like. We were having a party in school one day, and there were several cakes to share. Most of the children in this school, except for me, were from comfortable middle-class families. I was poorly dressed, with a funny bowl haircut, high-top black shoes, and I smelled from the raw garlic I had to eat every day to keep the worms away. We never had cake. We couldn't afford it. There was an old neighborhood woman who gave me 10 cents a week and $1 on my birthday and at Christmas. The 10 cents went into the family budget, and the $1 bought my underwear for the year at the dime store. So this day we were having a party at school, and there was so much cake that as they were cutting it, some of the kids who could have cake almost every day were getting 2 and 3 pieces. When the teacher finally got around to me, and of course I was last, there was no cake left, not one piece. I can see clearly now that it was my already confirmed belief that I was worthless and did not deserve anything that put me at the end of the line with no cake. It was my pattern. They were only being a mirror for my beliefs. When I was 15, I could not take the sexual abuse any longer, and I ran away from home and from school. The job I found as a waitress in a diner seemed so much easier than the heavy yard work I had to do at home. Being starved for love and affection, and having the lowest of self-esteem, I willingly gave my body to whoever was kind to me, and just after my 16th birthday, I gave birth to a baby girl. I felt it was impossible to keep her. However, I was able to find her a good, loving home. I found a childless couple who longed for a baby, and I lived in their home for the last 4 months, and when I went to the hospital, I had the child in their name. Under such circumstances, I never experienced the joys of motherhood, only the loss and the guilt and shame. Then it was only a shameful time to get over with as soon as possible. I only remember her big toes, which were unusual like mine. If we ever do meet, I will know for sure if I see her toes. I left when the child was 5 days old. I immediately went back home and said to my mother, who had continued to be a victim, "Come on, you don't have to take this any longer. I'm getting you out of here." And she came with me, leaving my 10-year-old sister, who had always been Daddy's darling, to stay with her father. After helping my mother get a job as a domestic in a small hotel and settling her into an apartment where she was free and comfortable, I felt my obligations were through. I left for Chicago with a girlfriend to stay a month and did not return for over 30 years. The violence I experienced as a child, combined with the sense of worthlessness I had developed along the way, attracted men into my life who mistreated me and often beat me. I could have spent the rest of my life berating men, and I probably would still be having the same experiences. Gradually, however, through positive work experiences, my self-esteem grew, and those kinds of men began to leave my life. They no longer fit my old pattern of unconsciously believing I deserved abuse. I do not condone their behavior, but if it were not my pattern, they would not have been attracted to me. Now, a man who abuses women does not even know I exist. Our patterns no longer attract. After a few years in Chicago doing rather menial work, I went to New York and was lucky enough to become a high-fashion model. Yet even modeling for the big designers did not help my self-esteem very much. It only gave me more ways to find fault with myself. I refused to recognize my own beauty. I was in the fashion industry for many years. I met and married a wonderful educated English gentleman. We traveled the world, met royalty, and even dined at the White House. Though I was a model and had a wonderful man, still my self-esteem remained low until years later when I began the inner work. One day, after 14 years of marriage, he announced his desire to marry another, just when I was beginning to believe that good things can last. Yes, I was crushed, but time passes, and I lived on. I could feel my life changing, and a numerologist one spring confirmed it by telling me that in the fall a small event would occur that would change my life. It was so small that I didn't notice it till several months later. Quite by chance, I had gone to a meeting at the Church of Religious Science in New York City. While their message was new to me, something within me said, "Pay attention," and so I did. I not only went to the Sunday services, but I began to take their weekly classes. The beauty and fashion world was losing its interest for me. How many years could I remain concerned with my waist measurement or the shape of my eyebrows? From a high school dropout who never studied anything, I now became an avaricious student, devouring everything I could lay my hands on that pertained to metaphysics and healing. The Church of Religious Science became a new home for me. Even though most of my life was going on as usual, this new course of study began to take up more and more of my time. And the next thing I knew, it was 3 years later, and I was eligible to apply to become one of the church's licensed practitioners. And that's where I began, as a church counselor many years ago. It was a small beginning. During this time, I became a transcendental meditator. My church was not giving the ministerial training program for another year, so I decided to do something special for myself. I went to college, MIU, Maharishi's International University in Fairfield, Iowa. It was the perfect place for me at that time. In the freshman year, every Monday morning we began a new subject, things I had only heard of, such as biology, chemistry, even the theory of relativity. And every Saturday morning there was a test, Sunday was free, and Monday morning we began anew. There were none of the distractions so typical of my life in New York City. After dinner, we all went to our rooms to study. I was the oldest kid on campus and loved every moment of it. No smoking, drinking, or drugs were allowed, and we meditated 4 times a day. The day I left, I thought I would collapse from the cigarette smoke in the airport. Back in New York, I resumed my life. I took the ministerial training program. I became very active in the church and in its social activities. I began speaking at their noon meetings and seeing clients, and this quickly blossomed into a full-time career. Out of the work I was doing, I was inspired to put together the little book, Heal Your Body, which began as a simple list of metaphysical causations for physical illnesses in the body. I began to lecture and travel and hold small classes. Then one day, I was diagnosed as having cancer. With my background of being raped at 5 and having been a battered child, it was no wonder I manifested cancer in the vaginal area. Like anyone else who has just been told they have cancer, I went into total panic. Yet because of all my work with clients, I knew that mental healing worked, and here I was being given a chance to prove it to myself. After all, I had written the book on mental patterns, and I knew cancer is a disease of deep resentment that has been held for a long time until it literally eats away at the body. I had been refusing to be willing to dissolve all the anger and resentment at them over my childhood. There was no time to waste. I had a lot of work to do. The word incurable, which is so frightening to so many people, means to me that this particular condition cannot be cured by any outer means, and that we must go within to find the cure. If I had an operation to get rid of the cancer and did not clear the mental pattern that created it, then the doctors would just keep cutting Louise until there was no more Louise to cut. And I didn't like that idea. If I had the operation to remove the cancerous growth and also cleared the mental pattern that was causing the cancer, then it would not return. If cancer or any other illness returns, I do not believe it is because the doctors did not get it all out, but rather that the patient has made no mental changes. They just recreate the same illness, perhaps in a different part of the body. I also believe that if I could clear the mental pattern that created this cancer, then I would not even need the operation. So I bargained for time, and the doctors grudgingly gave me 3 months when I said I did not have the money. I immediately took responsibility for my own healing. I read and investigated everything I could find on alternative ways to assist my healing process. I went to several health food stores and bought every book they had on the subject of cancer. I went to the library and did more reading. I checked out foot reflexology and colon therapy and thought they would both be beneficial to me. I seemed to be led to exactly the right people. After reading about foot reflexology, I wanted to find a practitioner. I attended a lecture, and while I usually sit in the front row, this night I was compelled to sit in the back. Within a minute, a man came and sat beside me, and guess what? He was a foot reflexologist. We met 3 times a week for 2 months, and it was a great help. I also knew I had to love myself a great deal more. There was little love expressed in my childhood, and no one had made it okay for me to feel good about myself. I had adopted their attitudes of continually picking on and criticizing me, which became second nature. I came to the realization through my work with the church that it was okay and even essential for me to love and approve of myself. Yet I kept putting it off, rather like the diet you will always start tomorrow. But I could no longer put it off. At first it was very difficult for me to do things like stand in front of the mirror and say, "Louise, I love you. I really love you." However, as I persisted, I found that several situations came up in my life where in the past I would have berated myself, and now, because of the mirror exercise and other work, I was not doing so. I was making some progress. I knew I had to clear the patterns of resentment I'd been holding since childhood. It was imperative for me to let go of the blame. Yes, I had had a very difficult childhood with lots of abuse, mental, physical, and sexual. But that was many years ago, and it was no excuse for the way I was treating myself now. I was literally eating my body with cancerous growth because I had not forgiven. It was time for me to go beyond the incidents themselves and to begin to understand what types of experiences could have created people who would treat a child that way. With the help of a good therapist, I expressed all the old bottled-up anger by beating pillows and howling with rage. This made me feel cleaner. Then I began to piece together the scraps of stories my parents had told me of their own childhood. I started to see a larger picture of their lives. With my growing understanding, and from an adult viewpoint, I began to have compassion for their pain, and the blame slowly began to dissolve. In addition, I hunted for a good nutritionist to help me cleanse and detoxify my body from all the junky foods I had eaten over the years. I learned that junky foods accumulate and create a toxic body. Junky thoughts accumulate and create toxic conditions in the mind. I was given a very strict diet with lots of green vegetables and not much else. I even had colonics 3 times a week for the first month. I did not have an operation, nor did I have radiation or chemotherapy. However, as a result of all the thorough mental and physical cleansing, 6 months after my diagnosis, I was able to get the medical profession to agree with what I already knew, that I no longer had even a trace of cancer. Now, I knew from personal experience that disease can be healed if we are willing to change the way we think and believe and act. Sometimes, what seems to be a big tragedy turns out to become the greatest good in our lives. I learned so much from that experience, and I came to value life in a new way. I began to look at what was really important to me, and I made a decision finally to leave the treeless city of New York and its extreme weather. Some of my clients insisted they would die if I left them, and I assured them I would be back twice a year to check on their progress, and telephones can reach everywhere. So I closed my business and took a leisurely train trip to California, deciding to use Los Angeles as a starting point. Even though I had been born here many years before, I knew almost no one anymore except for my mother and sister, who both now lived on the outskirts about an hour away. We had never been a close family, nor an open one, but still I was unpleasantly surprised to learn that my mother had been blind for a few years, and no one had bothered to tell me. My sister was too busy-ish to see me, so I let her be and began to set up my new life. My little book, Heal Your Body, opened many doors for me. I began to go to every New Age type of meeting I could find. I would introduce myself and, when appropriate, give out a copy of the little blue book. For the first 6 months, I went to the beach a lot, knowing that when I became busy, there would be less time for such leisurely pursuits. Slowly, the clients appeared. I was asked to speak here and there, and things began to come together as Los Angeles welcomed me. Within a couple of years, I was able to move into a lovely home. My new lifestyle in Los Angeles was a large jump in consciousness from my early upbringing. Things were going smoothly indeed. How swiftly our lives can change completely. One night, I received a phone call from my sister, the first call in 2 years. She told me our mother, now 90, blind and almost deaf, had fallen and broken her back. In one moment, my mother went from being a strong, independent woman to being a helpless child in pain. She broke her back and also broke open the wall of secrecy around my sister. Finally, we were all beginning to communicate. I discovered that my sister also had a severe back problem that impaired her sitting and walking, and which was very painful. She suffered in silence, and though she looked anorexic, her husband did not know she was ill. After spending a month in the hospital, my mother was ready to go home, but in no way could she take care of herself, so she came to live with me. Though trusting in the process of life, I did not know how I could handle it all, so I said to God, "Okay, I will take care of her, but you have to give me help, and you have to provide the money." It was quite an adjustment for both of us. She arrived on a Saturday, and the following Friday I had to go to San Francisco for 4 days. I could not leave her alone, and I had to go. And so I said, "God, you handle this. I have to have the right person to help us before I leave." And on the following Thursday, the perfect woman appeared and moved in to organize my home for me and my mother. It was another confirmation of one of my basic beliefs. Whatever I need to know is revealed to me, and whatever I need comes to me in divine right order. I realized it was lesson time for me once again. Here was an opportunity to clean up a lot of that garbage from childhood. My mother had not been able to protect me when I was a child. However, I could and would take care of her now. Between my mother and sister, a whole new adventure began. To give my sister the help she asked for presented another challenge. I learned that when I had rescued my mother so many years ago, my stepfather had then turned his rage and pain against my sister, and it was her turn to be brutalized. I realized that what started out to be a physical problem was then greatly exaggerated by fear and tension, plus the belief that no one could help her. So here was Louise, not wanting to be a rescuer, and yet wanting to give her sister an opportunity to choose wellness at this point in her life. Slowly the unraveling began. We progressed step by step as I strove to provide an atmosphere of safety while we explored various alternative avenues of healing. My mother responded very well. She exercised as best she could 4 times a day. Her body got stronger and more flexible. I took her to get a hearing aid, and she became more interested in life. In spite of her Christian Science beliefs, I persuaded her to have a cataract removed from one eye. What a joy for her when she began to see again, and for us to see the world through her eyes. She was so pleased to read again. My mother and I began to find time to sit and talk to each other in ways we had never done before. A new understanding developed between us. We both became freer as we cried and laughed and hugged together. Sometimes she pushed my buttons, which only told me there was something further for me to clear. In 1986, my mother passed away at 91, quickly and peacefully. We had cleared as much as we could, and both felt a release from guilt. My sister went back to her seclusion and is doing it her way. My work continues on an ever-expanding level. My staff continues to increase, and my goal is to create a world where it is safe for us to love each other. And this is where my life is now. In the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. Each one of us, myself included, experiences the richness and fullness of life in ways that are meaningful to us. I now look at the past with love and choose to learn from my old experiences. There is no right or wrong, nor good or bad. The past is over and done. There is only the experience of the moment. I love myself for bringing myself through this past into this present moment. I share what and who I am, for I know we are all one in spirit. All is well in my world.
This program is made possible by Hay House, an international publisher helping people transform their lives through books, audios, and gifts that inform, enlighten, and inspire. On the web at www.hayhouse.com.